Ukraine has attacked Russian energy facilities, including an oil refinery and a gas processing plant. Ukraine has been launching long-range drones against Russia's infrastructure for the last few weeks. Moscow has played down the damage.
Flames engulfed Russia's Astrakhan gas processing plant. This video released on social media showed the scenes after Ukrainian drones struck energy facilities in southern Russia. As a result, operations were suspended at a key gasoline and diesel fuel producer.
Work is constantly underway to determine the extent of damage to the combined stable condensate processing unit. The situation is under control, and there are no threats to personnel. Environmental standards and emission standards are not being violated.
The Russian authorities said at least 70 Ukrainian drones were intercepted over 6 Russian regions during the night. This map shows recent Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil sites with its long-range combat drones. They have attacked Russian refineries and factories multiple times this year. These strikes are intended to affect the Russian army's fuel supply and to reduce the oil revenues used by the Kremlin to fund its war.
More on this now from our correspondent Nick Connolly, who joins us live from Kyiv. Nick, why is Ukraine specifically targeting Russia's oil and gas facilities here?
As we heard in that report, it is first and foremost about the money. About a third of Russia's government revenues come from the export of oil and gas, so that is a crucial target from a Ukrainian perspective to try and prevent Russia continuing to finance this war. It's also about depriving the Russian army of their fuel supplies to stop them advancing, and in part, on a kind of local level, that has been quite successful. We did see deficits in energy, in oil and diesel supplies to the Russian army in the latter part of last year in some parts of the front lines. And it's also about air defense. Right now, Russia is able to basically send most of its air defense capability to the front lines in Ukraine to protect its soldiers from Ukrainian attack by plane, by drone. And by attacking all these targets, over 1,000 kilometers away from Ukraine's borders, deep in Russia, that is forcing the Russian military to rethink and to spread itself more thinly and to give Ukraine, a better chance at attacking these targets on the front lines here in Ukraine.
So tell us a little bit more about how effective this has been. Exactly what kind of impact is Ukraine's retaliation having on Russia's energy exports?
It's a really difficult one because, especially since this war began, Russia has become very secretive about its exports to try and get around sanctions. So lots of the statistics are either incomplete or are released very much delayed. So we don't really have a very clear picture. We're not sure that the numbers we're seeing are true. It does seem, though, that in the latter part of last year, Russia had to reduce its exports of refined oil products by about 10%. It compensated that with crude oil because basically Ukraine had been attacking the oil refineries, so it was having to sell crude oil, which is less profitable to sell because the added value is then done by the people buying that crude and processing it. On the other hand, it has to be said, rising oil prices worldwide have meant that even selling smaller volumes of oil has meant that the kind of sum that Russia receives seemingly hasn't changed that much. But I think Ukraine is trying to up its game. We are seeing that the drones that are reaching these targets deep in Russia are getting heavier. They're able to carry bigger weapons, bigger bombs, bigger explosives. It's obviously still not comparable to the kinds of ballistic missiles that hit Ukraine every day with tens or hundreds of kilos of warhead. These are much lighter drones, but we are seeing that whereas previously there would be localized fires, we're seeing sometimes fires that go on for days or weeks at these oil facilities that are then kind of laid lame for weeks, months at a time. We've seen the Ukrainians waiting for the Russians to repair certain oil facilities and then months later coming in just to attack them once more expensive equipment has been put there. And we've seen Russian oil ports on the Baltic Sea, for instance, having to basically stop processing ships because the pipelines have been hit and nothing is coming in addition to the Western sanctions that are really finally being kind of hardened up. We're seeing just the last thing the Biden administration did basically for Ukraine was to put more sanctions on Russia's tanker fleet. Altogether, it is having an impact, and it is meaning that less profit reaches the Russian government than would otherwise be the case.
So let's take a quick look at where things go from here. To carry on hitting these Russian targets, Ukraine says it needs Western support. Donald Trump has suggested he wants Ukraine to supply Washington with rare earth minerals. How has Ukraine reacted to this offer?
I think people here in Kiev, the politicians, are delighted. This is something they've been pushing. They've been trying to tell the Trump team that helping Ukraine is also helping America, that there is a business interest here, that Ukraine is not just, putting out a hand and asking for help, but that it has something to give in return and that profit can be made here. It has to be said that no one tried to develop these resources, lithium, titanium, on a big scale in recent decades, in terms of additional Western investment. So there is a lot of money that needs to be put up front to make this work. But certainly this is the kind of mutually beneficial deal that people here think they can do with Trump and get him interested.
Well, thank you so much, as always, for your insights. That is DW's correspondent Nick Connolly in Kiev.